Hi, I'm Old Norse Specialist Jackson Crawford. On my Patreon-supported YouTube channel about Norse language, myth, and literature, one of the subjects that I return to time and again is runes. And a topic that I often see people seeking more clarity on is that of Bindrunes, that meaning two or more runes written together as one symbol without a line between the letters. In this video, I'm going to show you a bunch of examples from real-life Elder Futhark runic inscriptions that have Bindrunes in them, and review a few of the principles behind Bindrunes, why we see them, where we see them, and of course, act as something of a spoilsport about the mystical associations that people have with them today. Alright, so let me start off with some of that spoilsportism. The runes are fundamentally an alphabet. They are letters for writing a language, just like our A, B, C, D, E. Now the runes do have names, and actually one of the most fascinating stories in runic studies is how we come to understand what those names were in the Elder Futhark period. I'll put a video on the screen that you can look for where I talk about how we do that. But these names are things like Fehu, money, or Hagalaz, hail, or Solo, sun, in the Proto-Germanic language that the Elder Futhark runes were used to write. We don't have any evidence that in the early medieval period the runes were actually held to represent those concepts. It seems instead that just like in the later period when Old Norse was written down in the Younger Futhark, that the rune could represent the word in the name, right? So for example, the rune that stands for the sound M, which is named manas, man, could be used in place of the whole word, manas, man, to save some space. And it seems like for the most part these names were more mnemonic devices than they were conceptual signifiers. That is to say, carving Fehu, the F rune, money, isn't held to summon money, right? If it were, I wouldn't have the need to make YouTube videos and tell you that they are Patreon supported and things like that. Yes, so, probably the biggest spoilsportism here, and the confession that I have to make, which is probably only a confession given what I talk about on YouTube, is that I don't believe in magic. While I think that probably the people carving these Elder Futhark inscriptions and runes did, I don't think most inscriptions had magical meaning. Instead, most of them have a very transparent meaning, usually along a few sort of predictable lines, right? So we have memorial stones where so-and-so says that he carved the runes to memorialize so-and-so. Or we have ownership tags, so-and-so owns this, maker tags, so-and-so made this. A lot of personal names. And just like you carve your name with however many letters it takes to write it in your native language, they will carve their names in however many rune letters it takes to write that name in the Elder Futhark runes. Now, bind runes are the writing of two or sometimes more runes as one continuous symbol without a break between the letters. What this produces can look pretty cool, pretty mystical to our eyes, but we're sort of conditioned to think of runes as being more inherently magical than our own A, B, C, D, or E, when in fact they weren't to the people carving them. You can carve or write something magical in the Roman alphabet, and you can carve or write something magical in the runic alphabet. It doesn't mean that the A, B, C, D, or the Fehu, Uruz, Thurisaz are inherently magical themselves. Bindrunes, then, are letters written together with no break between the letters. We do this in the Roman alphabet too sometimes. Look at, for example, the letter ash, right, which you can sometimes see even in modern English, particularly modern British English, and words like encyclopedia, right? An A and an E written together. Fundamentally, the concept behind a bind rune isn't any different. It's meant to save a little bit of space and or look kind of cool. And we have to remember that as cool as runes look to us, they probably also had something of a cool look to the people of the time when they were contemporary, as we can assume that not everyone would be literate, and so the very act of writing would have kind of a cool impact, right? Would look cool as a design, the same way that, even if you're highly literate in the Roman alphabet, if you write in a cool looking way, you can impress a reader today. Now, bind runes are more common in Elder Futhark than in Younger Futhark. This probably isn't a matter of principle exactly, but more a matter of what the letters look like. So in Younger Futhark, the 16-letter rune letter set that's used to write Old Norse, later than Elder Futhark, most of the vertical staves, the top-down lines, are in the middle of a letter, whereas in Elder Futhark, they're often on the outer edges of a letter. So there's more chances to use the same vertical stave as both the last line of one letter and the first line of the next letter, right? It's just stylistically more likely. But you also see a fair number of bind runes made with letters that have vertical staves in the middle of them too. So it also seems to have just been stylistically fashionable in Elder Futhark times. And I also ought to point out that we don't ever see meta talk about runes in the Elder Futhark period. Remember that the names of the runes are known to us only from Younger Futhark and then from Old English, not actually directly from the Elder Futhark period. And we never see a term like bind rune in Elder Futhark. So we don't know what they might have called these. They might have just called them, two letters or something like that. I think part of the mystic associations people get with bind runes today come from the fact that just like elder and Elder Futhark sounds mystical to us, even though it's just a more archaic way of saying older, the word bind has kind of mystic associations for modern English speakers, because probably the only place that most of us ever even think about it is in Tolkien, right? And in the darkness bind them, right? But bind just means together, right? It just means join. It's just joined runes. So, and by the way, it just occurred to me, the letter W in English is sort of a bind letter, if you will, right? It is called W. It's made from two V's, or from a medieval perspective, two U's, put together as one letter, right? So it doesn't have to be, and certainly, for the most part, isn't any kind of mystic intent. Let me pause here for just a second, give you a quick word from my sponsor, and come back and show you a bunch of real examples of bind runes from Elder Futhark inscriptions. All right, so like I said, most of the time, bind runes just seem to be kind of saving space or meant to look cool stylistically. Maybe one of the best examples of that is from the Bratsberg brooch, where we have probably what's just meant to look cool. This is a famous example of an Elder Futhark runic inscription. It includes the word Erilaz, the meaning of which we're not completely certain of. It seems to have something to do with writing runes. It may mean something like rune writer, rune master. And the inscription simply says, Ek Erilaz, I, the Erilaz. And it's on the inside face of a brooch, so it's not meant as decoration for someone else to see. It's just, it's a sort of private decoration for the owner or wearer. But notice that in especially Elder Futhark inscriptions, words are not necessarily separated from one another by spaces, and they're not here. And in fact, the very first four letters, which include the two letters of the word Ek-I and the first two letters of Erilaz, are all written together as one bind rune, right? That Eker is written as one running symbol. So we have the E, which contains the K, and then forms the outer stave of the first E forms the first stave of the next E, which has an outer stave that forms the first stave of the following R. So classic bind rune made of 4 runes. And then at the end, so we actually only have 2 runes that are written just on their own. The I, which is very hard to put into a bind rune because of course it's just one vertical stave on its own. You lose it binding it with another rune. The L. And then we have a bind rune of A and Z at the end, where we see an example of a rune that has a central vertical stave, not an outer vertical stave, the Z, bound together with another rune. Ek, Erulaz, classic example. But most of the examples that you can find if you just start browsing through runic inscriptions in the Elder Futhark involve the letter H, which is like the perfect medium for a bind rune, because you have a vertical stave on the left edge and on the right edge. And that's true whether you're writing left to right or right to left. Remember that Elder Futhark runes can be written left to right, they can be written right to left, or they can be written boustrophodon, which means starting left to right or right to left, and then alternating depending on which line you're in, kind of snaking across the page. So examples with H just abound. You can find, for example, on the Strum whetstone or the Hithra whetstone, we have the inscription Wate haldi hinno horna hahaskadi haduligi, which is poetic, or at least quasi-poetic with all that alliteration. But we get a lot of H's there, which provides us with a lot of opportunity for bind runes too. This means something like, may a horn wet the stone. Not whet, it's a whetstone, but it needs to get wet in order to whet. May a horn wet the stone, let the hay be cut, and the mown hay lie down. Here we see a whole bunch of bind runes in the word holly, stone. We see H and A bound together. In the last word, horna, we see the N and the A bound together. A obviously participates in a bunch of bind runes too. You got a nice vertical stave on its left edge. And we have 2 HAs in a row, haha, hay. And then another HA in the second line too, and hadu, the mown hay. So classic examples right there. Then we see on the Steinstad stone telemark, we see more H's, right? Ingiohalas, so an HA bind rune. We have a right to left example on the Hjellvik inscription from Rogaland, Norway. In Hadurleikas ek hagustadas hlawido magu minino. Hadurleika is probably the name of the person buried. I, Hagustada, buried my son. So hlawido, I buried. We see an HL bind rune. So notice that what's getting bound together, again, are runes that have on their outer edges a vertical stave that can be bound together with the facing outer edge of the next rune's vertical stave. And then I want to draw your attention also to one with the D or Ez rune, Dagaz, on the Tuna stone, where we read, and I'm not going to read the whole inscription, but the first 2 lines, Ek wiwas after woderi they witanda halaivan warchto. I was in memory of Wuderidas the Lord, where the word Lord has 2 bind runes. We have a DA and Witanda and an HA and Halaivan. Again, outer edges, vertical staves, just being written together as one. Now, this means that the least likely rune, as I already kind of mentioned, to participate in a bind rune is the I, right, the Isaz, because it is just one vertical stave. However, there is one bind rune that I have seen with the I, and that's a bind rune with the rune Ingwaz, the Ing sound, like in ring or sing, where you can write actually the whole sequence Ing, right, what we'd write ING, as basically I with a diamond in the middle of it. So Isaz bound together with Ingwaz in a whole ing Bindrune. Now, on the outer edges, there are some Bindrunes where you have entire words written together as one Bindrune, one symbol. For what might be esoteric, or at least, what's a good word for it? Dedicatory purposes. I'm not quite willing to say magical purposes in the case that I'm thinking about, which is where we see the words Thor bless runes, and an inscription from Denmark carved in the 960s or so AD, a time when Denmark was becoming Christian, and perhaps someone wishing to express a pagan sentiment like Thor bless the runes might want to disguise it. So we have a pretty basic sort of funerary inscription, no religious content, just I think so-and-so had buried his brother so-and-so. But above that, written perpendicular to the actual runes that have that memorial inscription, are those words, Thor bless runes. But the entire word Thor is written together as a Bindrune. The entire word bless is written together as a Bindrune. The entire word runes is written together as a Bindrune. And that's even more unusual because it's Younger Futhark, right? Where stylistically it seems like Younger Futhark inscribers didn't favor Bindrunes as much as Elder Futhark carvers. So that's an example where just the sort of mystery of having to piece out a Bindrune and understand what the pieces were might have assisted in getting across a message that was more esoteric, more arcane than the more pedestrian content of the plain runes beneath it. But that only emphasizes that the plain runes have plain meanings, just like our A, B, C, D, E, F, G, etc. In fact, those Bindrunes remind me a little bit of brands. Not to be too true to my own brand in raising that example, but I mean the other kind of brands like you put on cows and horses, where calling a brand is actually kind of an art, right? You have to know what direction to read the particular constituents, you know, the letters and the bars and the ruckin and the circle and whatever, and be able to describe the brand and remember, you know, so-and-so has the circle J, or so-and-so has the X bar B, or what have you. So I hope that is a reasonable introduction to Bindrunes and where to find them, a little field guide to Bindrunes, and what they mean and how they're used. And for now, from beautiful Colorado in the golden part of the early autumn, I'm wishing you all the best.